Toss aside the touchy-feely notions of love in business and recognize the real power it holds. Welcome to the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast with host Steve Farber. Drawing on his work with a wide variety of companies from the Fortune 100 to smaller family-owned businesses, Farber shares inspiring interviews with business leaders and proven strategies for how you can create experiences that your customers will love by developing a culture that your employees, teammates, and colleagues love working in. Discover why and how love, at the end of the day, is just damn good business for you too. Here's your host, Steve Farber.
Well, hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. I'm your host, Steve Farber, and my guest today is Michael Levy, who is the CEO of Crow Holdings. So if you've been in the real estate industry, or you know the real estate industry fairly well, you will likely have heard the company named Trammell Crow, based in Texas. Been around for a long time. They have a sterling reputation as a brand, a family-held company for a very long time. Well, Michael, as the CEO, is an investment banker, a real estate guy, a numbers guy, a deal guy. He came up through Morgan Stanley. He was there starting, I think, in 1998. And he was, before he left, the chief operating officer for the investment management division of Morgan Stanley. So he's been in this industry a long time. Came to Trammell Crow in 2016. So again, real estate guy, deal guy, investment banking guy, numbers guy. You know all the stereotypes that are associated with those kind of roles. So the question, of course, is, where does love fit in to this equation? Or to quote the famous philosopher Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it? Well, funnily enough, something pretty significant. Shouldn't surprise you given the name of this podcast. So here now is my conversation with the inspiring CEO of Crow Holdings, Michael Levy. Enjoy. Hey, Michael, thanks for joining me on the Love is Just Damn Good Business podcast. It's great to see you here, man.
Steve, great to see you again, too. Thanks for having me.
So let's start out a little bit with the high level. So I'd like our listeners to know about Crow Holdings, Trammell Crow, what you guys do, and then I want to get into your story and what led you to this role as the CEO, and talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy and all that good stuff. And our conversation will take us wherever it takes us.
Okay, sounds good.
So tell us a little bit about the company. Yeah,
sure. So we're a Dallas headquartered company. Our company was founded in 1948 by a gentleman named Trammell Crow. And by the 1950s and 60s, Trammell had built one of the largest real estate development and services companies in the United States. And he had a particularly unique way of building a business. He didn't necessarily hire employees. He would go into local markets and partner with people, literally like individual entrepreneurs. And he would extend his balance sheet and his ability to get loans and lending, and he would split 50% of the profits with individuals all over America. And that business model took off, this form of partnership, and in a very short period of time became the largest real estate company in America.
Now, was that a unique business approach at the time for this industry?
There were two things that Trammell, very innovative guy, two things he did. First, and to your non-real estate listeners, none of this may mean very much, but he was the first person to do what they call speculative industrial buildings or speculative warehouses. He built a warehouse and didn't have it pre-leased to anybody. I'll build it and they will come. And that really wasn't done at that time. And then really his main impact was the spirit of partnership. You know, I'm building a company. These people aren't employees. They're all partners. And he created a network of hundreds of partners throughout the country, ultimately over many years. That was a fundamental hallmark. And so individuals with no resources, no capital, but good people that he found, that he met along the way, that he thought were talented, young and middle-aged people, he would extend, his financial wherewithal and provide them the opportunity to be entrepreneurial and to find development sites and to build buildings and markets and split 50% of the upside, with those individuals. And it created tremendous wealth across America. And that business model, that spirit, built an incredible tree and an alumni network and a spirit of goodwill that extends to this day. Very powerful.
So he would make his decisions as to who he partnered with based on just his belief in their ability to be a good partner.
In the goodness through instinct and the goodness of people, and in the goodness he found and felt in people. And that word is I use that word, but many people have used that word. There was no psychological profile. There was no HR department, running tests. It was his sense, and that carried through to the culture of the company to this day.
So fast forward to today. What are your focus areas?
Sure. So obviously that's 75 years ago. So things evolve, and your listeners who might have some age like me and know the real estate business. The late 1980s was a terrible period of time for real estate. The company went through a major restructuring. And so it evolved and it changed through that restructuring. His son, Harlan, took over the business in the late 1980s or around 1990 and effectively rebuilt the company as a real estate investment firm and a real estate development firm, and then a diversified portfolio of other investments beyond real estate so there wasn't singular exposure to one asset class. And so today, roll the clock forward 30 years, give or take, we have a real estate investment business. We raise funds and other ventures from institutional investors all over the world. And we invest in real estate in the United States that we didn't develop, that we didn't build. Other people did. We acquire, we seek to add value. Ultimately, we sell that real estate. We try and generate returns, attractive returns for our investors. And there's a business and a group of people in Dallas, Texas that do that across the United States. And then we also have the real estate development business. And that business is a local business. We have about 20 offices around the country. And we are one of the largest developers of multifamily properties and industrial properties in the United States. And we have boots on the ground in these different markets. And we maintain, while it's perhaps not a network of individual partnerships, that spirit of partnership with all our people in the business, and that sharing of the economic opportunity is maintained to this day across the organization in both the investment business and the development business.
And what does it look like on the residential side of the business as well?
Well, when I use the word multifamily, I do mean residential. Okay. So we are not today a builder of single family homes in America. And that largely has not been our focus while we've done that over the years. So when I use the word residential, that's also a term of art that we can use for the building of apartments, or the other word is multifamily properties.
Right. And you have an international reach as well, right?
In the history of the company, there was a fair amount of activity internationally in the 1970s and the 1980s. When the business changed in the late 1980s, we pulled back from those operating activities and those operating businesses. We do own a number of assets outside the United States, but we're not a deep operational company outside of the United States today in terms of building businesses and building new activities. We do have investment partners from all over the world who are investing in real estate in the United States in partnership with us. Gotcha.
All right. So Michael Levy comes along to Crow Holdings just 5 years ago or so?
A little over. Yep.
Okay. And you came up through Morgan Stanley. So you're so how would you? So high level for Michael Levy, if I had to put you in a stereotype box and just give you a label, doesn't that sound like fun? what would that be in terms of your history before coming to Crow Holdings?
If you had to narrow it down to the fewest number of words, real estate finance.
Real estate finance. Okay. So what is it that brought you here into this role?
I met this person named Harlan Crow down in Dallas, Texas, and he floored me in terms of the person that he was. I had never met Harlan. You can't be in the real estate business in the United States and not one way or another have touched this organization or be aware of its history. And from the moment I met Harlan, I could see that sense of goodness. You could touch it, feel it, and the people around him. It wasn't obviously just him. It was, the leadership of the company to the young people that I met. It was pervasive through the culture of this organization. And my wife and I, we're New Yorkers our entire lives. And I was like, I want to be part of this. I was like, this was, Steve, my whole life working in finance, you're a very analytical person and you have opportunities, clearly in your career. And I would always analyze those opportunities from a career perspective. I'm doing this today. I have this much responsibility. I have this economic opportunity. This new company offers me X role and X responsibilities and X money. And it was always an analytical exercise. This had pulled at my heart. 50 years old, I said, I want to go do this.
Was it that fast?
We had met one another 2 years prior to me making the decision and Harlan had just started. Look, there's obviously a very important decision for him and the family, the first non-Crow family member as CEO of the firm. It was very clear in the beginning, in the first few months, we were really getting to know one another and it was going well. And we spent some time and I met a lot of people here and I really enjoyed my career at Morgan Stanley and I learned a lot. It was wonderful. And about 5 months into it, it was moving forward. But at that point in time, I got an opportunity at my last firm to take a much larger role. I got a phone call on a Thursday, said, hey, this is your shot. You take your time. But by the way, by Monday, we want to announce it. So I did that for a year. And then I got Harlan and his colleagues continued to look. And a year later, I got a call back, say, hey, Michael, what are you doing? And how's your life? And we reconnected. And it was very clear to me, I was like, I want to go do this. And now that I had another year of an opportunity to lead other roles at my firm, it satisfied quenched some thirst I had to understand what the opportunity was there. And then once we reconnected, it came together very quickly. And I came on board.
What I find interesting about that is there seems to be a parallel between how you described how Trammell Crow, Harlan's dad, started this company, what you described at the outset of the decisions that he made as to who he partnered with weren't primarily analytical, it seems. They were more relationship oriented. And it sounds like the decision that you made to come here is kind of in that same category, at least compared to a typical analytical decision that a finance guy would make.
Undoubtedly. It grabbed my heart.
So have you found, is that reflected when you first made the move and joined this company that was built on those values, and obviously has been through a lot of changes and passed from one generation to the next, et cetera. But when you started actually working there day to day in your new role, and you looked around the company, did you find it to be really kind of congruent with that feeling all the way throughout? I mean, was it really part of the culture, or was it more a reflection of a couple of very influential individuals' personalities?
Absolutely. Throughout this organization, it was entirely congruent. I wasn't surprised at all. It's deep. It's throughout this organization.
So obviously, as the CEO of the company, I mean, let's be clear. As the CEO of the company, you really can't answer that question any other way, right?
Well, of course, Steve. But nonetheless, I did make a decision, and at the time I made the decision, I had met many people here. I had probably met and spent time with 30 or 40 people at Crow before I made the decision. So I knew before I joined, it wasn't just Harlan and a couple other senior people. It was clear to me. And the other thing is, I could speak to other people. There were friends I had in the business who knew this organization of people, and you can very quickly get to the heart of what it's really like. And I knew it was real. It was. So yes, to your point, of course, I need to confirm that.
Yeah. So the extension of that question is, so what can you give some examples of what it looked like for you as you began to to get in the inner workings of the company? How did those kind of qualities, those personal qualities that you responded to, how do they show up in the way you do business?
Trust, relationships, trusting in your people, giving people the opportunity, not running a business through control mechanisms per se. Of course, you need controls in place, but running a business through trusting in your people and giving them that freedom and that opportunity to express themselves and their creativity. I think that's what everybody wants. Doesn't everybody want that? Who doesn't want that? And so can your organization provide that or not? That trust.
Right.
Look, this is an organization, it's good, honorable, capable, committed, decent people who work in this organization. That's what it's attracted. That's the people who run it. So that's what I've seen throughout here. And that's not me. I stepped into that. I didn't create that. I joined that. And I'm privileged every day that they let me join, that group of people.
So what is it about you and your own personal approach to leadership that you've developed over the years in your storied career? What is it about you that found resonance with the Crow culture?
Steve, the reason I'm doing this podcast with you now is because in 2004, I read your book, Radical Leap, right? I've read a lot. I'm sure your listeners have read a lot of books and a lot of articles on leadership. As a younger man and as a middle-aged man, and I've read a lot of books on leadership. And I don't say this because I'm on your podcast. I said this to you when I reached out to you recently.
Yeah.
You're the only book on leadership that captured my soul when I read it. I've read a lot of books on organizational skills and talking about empathy and being authentic, but that point of love, right, and the energy that brings, and the audacity to seek these objectives and goals, and then having to prove it, it called at me, and all those years. And so I joined this organization, and you and I have talked about this, but Trammell in the 1970s, famous, there's videos, you can probably YouTube it. He was up at Harvard Business School where he was recruiting. He was a big hirer of young people from Harvard. And one of the young people in the audience is when the student said, Mr. Crow, what's the secrets to business success? And he didn't hesitate, and he went out and he said, love. Love is the secret to business success. Now, in the 1970s, that probably wasn't the kind of thing you would say.
Right.
So, maybe I'm not directly answering the question you just asked, but I think it's important for your viewers as well. Like, why am I here and why are we talking? That's why I'm here and talking, because I, as a person, was so attracted to what you had to say because it appealed to my sensibilities. I was like, yes, that is leadership. That is the qualities. And then I meet these people, and I actually didn't know that Trammell said that before I joined. And then I saw a video of him, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Some kid on the back row back up there said with a voice I thought had a little bit of irony in it or cynicism in it, asked me, he said, Mr. Crow, what is the one thing which is the greatest element of success? When I knew in a flash what to say, but I was timid to say it. But after a long pause, I just said, well, what the dickens? I was just going to say it. And you know what it is? It's love. It's the most powerful, force in the world and will do more for us individually and as a company than anything else we can do. And I stand here pouring out love to you all and telling you goodbye. Have a good trip home, and I'll see you in your home, and I'll see you back here soon, I hope.
And so from a leadership perspective, those traits, those characteristics, and it doesn't mean in the other books I've read that, the organizational skills. I remember years ago, like I'm sure lots of folks, the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and different skills. I'm not saying there aren't truisms in there, but, I think this point of love, and, I don't want your viewers to, it's not like romantic love or parental love. It's value in people as an end in themselves, not a means to an end, but they're an end in themselves, and that the dignity and worth, right, of the person, and that you're believing you're trusting in the fundamental goodness of that person, those characteristics, and you want what's best for them. And that doesn't mean it's always going to work out and you're all going to work together forever and you run a business and you have to make decisions. But that,
yeah,
that's what appeals. That to me appeals to me.
So well, first of all, thank you for those lovely words. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and I'm really deeply gratified to hear that. I'm wondering if tell me if I'm describing this right. It's not like back in 2004, you were some micromanaging, people-hating schmuck, and then you read this book, and there was a miraculous transformation. It confirmed who you already were. It just put a framework around what you already knew to be true.
It put words. Look, when I was at that point and younger, you were always searching for the secret rules or the secret sauce, or there's something out there. And so there were 2 things. One, look, I am who I am. I'm an older version of the person I was. I have more experience, but fundamentally, my friends can answer the question for you. But even though I worked at a large company with this fabulous global financial institution, I happened to work in a group with a group of people who exhibited that. I worked with terrific people and exhibited that. So it wasn't only I was already operating in a microcosm environment that had people and leadership who were exhibiting those skills. And I had worked for a couple of companies before them, and I had worked for leaders who were terrorists.
Yeah.
And I had worked for leaders who operated out of anger. And I had worked for leaders who had all different skills that you looked at. They all had skills and they all were successful for different reasons. But when I joined, that firm and worked for these people, that's what attracted me. That's why I stayed there for 18 years.
So you've had this kind of inner center of gravity, this inner magnet, as it were, that attracted you to those kind of people. Because it's similar, what you just described is similar to what you said, as to what brought you to Trammell Crow, right? Is that feeling, it's like, oh, these are my kind of people.
Well, when I joined them in 1998, and at the time I was much more junior in my career and things were different. So I didn't join for that reason. It was an opportunity. I was a young investment banker. It was an opportunity to work at Morgan Stanley. It was a very solid career opportunity. It just so happens that when I joined the group, that the people who were running the group were those kind of people. And they're my friends today and my alumni, and it's a terrific network. So I didn't join them for that reason. I joined it because it was an amazing brand with a terrific business, and my background, it was a step up. And I was like, this should be good for my career. It was an analytical decision. It turned into an emotional relationship. And I was blessed, because of that.
So in your various leadership roles that you've played in your career, and particularly now as the CEO, you mentioned a few of these qualities earlier about trust and relationship, et cetera. This is the primary question that we try to answer on this podcast is those great feelings and those great attributes. What do they look like? What should we? How do we operationalize them? What should they look like in the mechanics of how we do business? So one way of asking the question, the most direct way, is what does love look like in the way that you lead and in the company that you're shepherding?
Do you care? Do you care about the people? My objective in my role as CEO is to create opportunity for the people that work here. Look, I'm a private business. I'm not a public company. I don't have to report to public shareholders looking at quarterly earnings where my objective might be a certain financial metric. We have investors all over the world. We have investment vehicles. We are partners with many people. We are in a business to generate attractive risk-adjusted financial returns. It is our job. We must do that well. But when it rolls up to the company Crow Holdings, within that construct, my objective is to create opportunity for the people that work here. And if that is your objective, you're going to care about the people that work for you. You're going to love those people in the context in which I just communicated. And that's a very virtuous cycle, because if people work within an environment like that, and they believe that you're committed to creating an opportunity, and you prove it to them, right, then they're empowered to go out and lead themselves, because leadership is about inspiring leadership. That's what leadership is about.
Yeah.
Not getting people to follow you, inspiring them to lead.
So, in the context of your business, obviously one of the ways you do that, and again, it goes back to how Trammell Crow built the company, is giving people opportunities to prosper through their work.
Of course.
But I would assume there's even more to it than that. I mean, obviously, money is always a wonderful thing, and my philosophy has always been that this idea that we have that somehow personal joy and individual wealth and prosperity and making a difference in the world are somehow mutually exclusive ideas. My philosophy has always been it's all the above at the same time.
I didn't use the word, maybe earlier I used money. I didn't think I did, but I didn't use the word money. I used the word opportunity. And think about what any person wants. Maybe not any, most. You want more responsibility, more autonomy, more technical knowledge, more. You want to grow as a person. You want to grow as a professional in all of those respects. I don't really know anybody who wants to be micromanaged. I think people want more autonomy. I think people generally seek more responsibility, not less. I think people generally crave more knowledge and more domain expertise, not less. And of course, we're all providing for ourselves and our families, every one of us. And I really don't know anybody who, when you ask them from a financial perspective, would you like less? That the answer is yes to that. Right. And so this word opportunity is all of those things. And that's what I think it's about. I think that's the framework you're trying to create for people.
So in your role as CEO, when you look at the direction of the company, is that, I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, that's actually part of your strategic vision for the company. So as you said a couple of minutes ago, if I'm a publicly traded company, there's this tendency. It's not always the case for every public CEO, but it's a huge factor that you've got the earnings that everybody's looking at, and you've got to appeal to the street and et cetera, which might tempt you to subjugate some of your other ideals, thinking that that's going to help you increase the bottom line. So you don't have that external pressure on you. So when you look at the future of the company and where you want to take this, tell us a little bit about that and how how your people factor into that.
Sure. So just stick for a moment. I'll go to that in a moment.
Yeah.
But if you stick with this point about the points I made about creating that environment, creating people for opportunity for people to work there, that allows us to attract and retain the best people. Obviously, I'm biased, and I recognize there are great real estate companies all over America, but certainly we're able to attract and retain amongst the best talent in the marketplace who are amongst the best at what they do. And so our ability to deliver the underlying capabilities to the marketplace is enhanced by the environment in which we create for the people that work here. It's a completely linked environment. There's a strategic element to our business, which is, the underlying real estate business, making decisions that are about strategy that aren't about people. And so as a business person, and again, your viewers who are not in the real estate business, I don't want to talk past anybody, but in the real estate business, there are secular forces at work in America today that are affecting different geographies and different property types differently. E-commerce is driving unprecedented demand for industrial real estate. There's growth in industrial real estate. The tailing edge of millennials and the leading edge of Gen Zs is the largest age cohort ever to be in that age group to really rent, apartments that 20s to early 30s. They don't buy as much, they rent. And so people are moving to the Southeast and the Southwest. This is long before COVID, in droves. So as a strategy, as a business, we look at those things. And if we get that wrong, we have the best people in the world.
Yeah.
And we'll still have a great company, but we won't be in the marketplace. And for our investment partners, we won't be able to deliver. So our strategy has to be right, and our people has to be right. But you can have a great strategy and terrible people and fail on the execution.
Right.
So you really need the strategy to be successful. And we do our best. And look, I think I'll let others judge that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a funny thing. There's something about, I think, the baggage that I'm overgeneralizing here, that we business people in general bring to this whole discussion, which is there's some kind of a choice that we have to make between the people thing and the strategy thing, right? It's like, what's more important? Is it the culture or is it the strategy? Is it the people or is it the strategy? What's more important, Farber? I hear this a lot. Is it love or is it the bottom line? And the answer, of course, is yes. It's all of the above. Why do we force ourselves into this scenario where we feel we have to choose between the two?
Look, I'm going to start with, I recognize I'm in a terrific position that I work in a private business, that the Crow family are just wonderful, considerate, benevolent people who believe that the business is a partnership between the people that work there and the family. And I recognize not everybody works in an environment and has other stakeholders who may give less consideration to some of these elements. And I think ownership matters. Ownership matters, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what business you're in. But I certainly am here to tell some people that you really can be in a company. And I would hope and imagine that many of your viewers, and certainly some of them, feel that way, that they believe that they're in an organization, whether it's a small partnership or a big company. And I hope there are some public companies where people really feel both of those things are going on. And I imagine there is. But we all see what's taking place, and whether your company is owned by a private equity firm that has certain IRR objectives and needs to sell you in 2 years, or you're owned by a public company who missed earnings by a penny, and those things are going to drive the boards and the management teams to do things that perhaps subordinate some of these issues.
Right.
And look, at the same time, I do operate in a business, and there's, good times and bad times. And, as an entity, the question is, how do you manage people through those periods of time? And you make mistakes, but, there's been horrible recessions in real estate across the United States, and this company had to shrink materially. And, but how you treated them while they were here,
Right.
and how they moved on and what they did next, and the goodwill. Do you destroy the goodwill that you built up, or do you maintain the goodwill? How do you handle that transition? And I learned a lot about that over the years on Wall Street.
Yeah. We are in the midst, the grand we, the capital W-we, are in the midst of what many are calling the Great Resignation.
Yep.
I've heard some people beginning to refer to it as the Great Upgrade. Many people who are leaving for better opportunities. So wherever you fall on that, is that having an impact on you guys at all?
Not materially at all. I've asked these questions quite often, and in our company in total, we have hundreds of people who work here, and obviously I look at the I don't mean the executive leadership team. I look at the broader senior leadership team, and people are staying with us, and people have choice. They have lots of choice. I asked myself the same question. I said, it must be a good place for people to work at. I recognize I'm biased. You mentioned that earlier, but we are not experiencing what I'm hearing, from many of my friends at companies, throughout the country. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed.
So it strikes me as an interesting double-edged sword, that people who have the greatest amount of choice as to where they work tend to be the most talented people, generally speaking. And as a company, I want to keep the most talent. I want to attract and keep the most talented people, which means I want to attract and keep the very people who, one could argue, are more likely to choose to leave because they have so much more opportunity. So if I can create a place where they don't want to do that, I've hit on all cylinders.
So go create opportunity for them. Help them create opportunity, provide the framework. And of course that means at a fundamental level, growth, right? Because if you're trying to create an environment where everyone is seeking more autonomy, more responsibility, all these things, obviously, if your organization isn't growing, that's going to limit that, and certain people will create opportunity, others won't. And I don't mean to say all of our growth is a function of decisions we make. To some extent, we're a cork bobbing in the water of a macroeconomic environment.
Right.
And, in our industry, we've been experiencing a positive environment largely since 2008. COVID obviously impacted us to some extent, although COVID for our space in the real estate business, COVID only positively accelerated, the trends under our business. But to create opportunity, you do have to create growth. Growth is generally consistent with economic and financial success. And to your point earlier, it's not an either or. You actually can pursue both. The question is, sometimes you need to be patient. Sometimes the things don't happen in a quarter. Sometimes they don't happen in a year. Sometimes they don't happen in 3 years. Yeah. And can your owners withstand the patience or the volatility if you have good people with good strategies? And I think that's where the tension embedded in the conversation is.
Yeah, and I think the ability to hang on to that, like Harlan Crow did in rebuilding the company. He hung on, the way I understand it, from what you described, he hung on to those values in order to rebuild the company. He didn't abandon the values because suddenly he felt that they were inconvenient somehow. And I think the people who have the intestinal fortitude to take their enterprise through those difficult times, it's because that deeper level, those values, for example, of cultivating love in their organization are real. They're not something that they adopted because they thought it was going to give them a certain benefit. It's just part of the way it should be, and that becomes that becomes the anchor when those waves are moving up and down, and you're that aforementioned cork bobbing on the ocean. That anchor doesn't change. If it does, that's it. You're not bobbing anymore. You're washed out with the tide. I think we've beat that metaphor to death, but you get where I'm going with that.
What's the other word used? Authentic, right? Yeah. If it's not you, if it's not who you are, if that doesn't drive you, then it's not authentic. Then it ultimately will fail during times of distress, right? You can fake it, during good times, but anybody who's lived through distress in their companies or the environment during periods of stress, the true you is going to come out one way or another.
Yeah. It strikes me, I think there are significant differences between family dynamics and work dynamics. That's why I've never been completely comfortable with the idea that a business is a family. So, for example, I think there are a lot of similarities, but I look at my family and my kids and the challenges when they were growing up that all kids have from time to time. I never considered firing any of them, but I've had to let people go in business, right? So there are differences there, of course, but there's something about there are lessons that can be learned across those differences. For example, in a marriage, it's really easy to look at your significant other when you're making a ton of money and everything's great and everybody's healthy and say, "Oh, I love you, honey. Oh, I love you too." And then you take that money away, and now you're having a discussion about how are you gonna pay the rent. If you can still look at each other across the table and say, "I love you, honey. We're gonna get through this." You got a great marriage.
That's a good analogy, Steve. I like that.
Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. No, I totally am. It's kind of an amazing thing. And speaking of family, here's the way I'd like to begin to take this in for a landing. I'm going to ask you a question from a personal standpoint, because it just so happens that one of my kids, I've got, between Veronica and myself, we have 6 kids. They're all adults. The youngest is 26. My son Jeremy started his higher education a little bit later in life. He's in his early 30s now, and he's just about to graduate from Columbia with a degree in economics. And he's got a very strong interest in commercial real estate, and he's working. He did an internship with a little boutique private equity real estate company in Manhattan. They offered him a job. As soon as he's done with Columbia, he's got a job there, and he's looking. He's looking. So he loves this stuff, and of course, he's looking at, well, where can I make the most money? Where can I have the best opportunity? He's also, being a little bit older, coming into the marketplace, has a little more perspective on quality of life issues that he might not have had 10 years ago if he had gone a traditional route and gone to school right out of high school, for example. So this is the personal question. If you were mentoring Jeremy and giving him advice at this juncture where he's walking in May. So right at this juncture, and thinking about all this discussion that we just had and your knowledge of the industry, what advice would you give him?
Perhaps it's as a result of the conversation. I do think at those early stages in your career, trying to find an environment, a company where you have a high degree of confidence that you really get the, I'm going to use some lingo here, the technical chops, that you're joining an organization that has enough deal flow or enough transaction activity or enough volume, right? That you're going to get the repetitions and the experience, that muscle memory that you need. Now, of course, I'm not suggesting just go into a pressure cooker in a sweatshop but when you're balancing these variables of culture, right, over, a business that has good business activity, I think earlier in your career as you're learning your skill set and those technical skills, that's of higher relative value.
Right.
And you're also young. So, okay, I learned and I don't really like these people, but I can put up with them. I can do anything for a few years, but it's a good brand, and I'll meet a lot of people. I'll network. I think that's a valuable thing that when you're young and starting out is important, because I know that if the decisions I took early on, and I didn't understand this conversation when I first started out, I just happened to come out of school and land in a shop where I had a lot of reps and worked really hard and built that muscle memory. That became very valuable. And today, 30 plus years later, I'm leveraging that today. So that would be my advice in the context of a conversation like this.
Yeah, that's great. So it's that that balance shifts a little bit over time. In the beginning, I've got to get the chops. I've got to build those skills, get the experience. And if I can find a place that will do that, and the culture is great and the people are awesome, that's fantastic. And I don't want to go too far one way or the other to balance that out. I'm thinking, because thank you for saying that, because it makes perfect sense to me. My bias, given my work, is the question. The first question is always, it's always a question. Well, how much money can you make there? That's a reasonable part of the question, because I'd like for all of my kids to be prosperous. But it's my first default question is, so what are they like? What are the people like? How do you like it? Is it fun?
All right, Steve, it's a trifecta. They pay you well, you're getting great experience, and it's a warm, embracing culture. That'd be great. How about that?
Yeah.
So when you say, okay, but you got to rank order this stuff, right? I think early in your career, experience is far more valuable than money, right? Mm. And I'd almost be like experience, culture, money. Now, if you can't eat,
yeah, right,
and you can't earn a living wage, so Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
yeah,
but I'm making the assumption of a person out of Colombia will have options, and he'll be able to eat and pay rent, kind of, within a frame.
Yeah. Because I ain't doing it. I ain't feeding him and paying his rent. I'll tell you that much. We're past that. No, that's great. That's really cool. I'm excited to share that with him. Well, Michael, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for your candor and for your willingness to share your experience with us. And I'm really I'm excited to see where you go with this. And that leads me to my last question, which is, what's the future that you're trying to create there together? Give us a little glimpse over the horizon of time.
I've already told you, I'm trying to create opportunity for the people that are here, which means I'm working with them to grow. And, today we have a business where we have a relatively small, let's call it senior leadership team. And I'm looking to broaden that leadership team to a broader group of people, so that when they take it into the next generation, they're able to continue and compound that, for 75 more years. And that's, what exactly we do within that strategically. We will evolve and innovate and change, but that's what I'm doing. That's what my colleagues are doing. My partners who we work on this together, that's the future for us. But I must finish with, I want to thank you for impacting my life. You didn't know this, but I read that book and it stuck with me. I gave your book this past year to 40 people who work here because it impacted me. I reached out to you recently as I was thinking about growth and leadership for the people that work here and who are people that I respected. And so I want to thank you for that. And it's my privilege to be here with you today. And it's been nice to get to develop a personal relationship with you recently. So I wish you well in your endeavors and this podcast, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's been a great pleasure. And for all of you listening, until next time, do what you love in the service of people who love what you do.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Love is Just Damn Good Business with Steve Farber. Join us again next time, because when customer and employee satisfaction just isn't enough anymore, we are here to back you up with specific ideas to operationalize love to make an enormous difference in your business, personal life, and the world around you. Visit our website at stevefarber.com to leave a review. And don't forget to share the love with your colleagues and friends, because after all, it's just damn good business.